Hello and welcome to the York Creatives Podcast. My name is Ben Porter, and each week you can join me as I chat to someone from York's creative community. This week's guest is David Jarman. David is a poet, a playwright and a songwriter, currently working on a solo show called Made of Nowhere, to be produced in autumn 2018. This time last year he was poet in residence at the Great Yorkshire Fringe. He's also an associate artist at both Say Out and Common Ground Theatre, and as a playwright he's written reimaginings of Robin Hood, Alice in Wonderland and The Wind and The Willows, which have been performed at York Theatre Royal and Bolton Abbey Estate. In this episode we chat about the juggling act of working across multiple mediums, his advice on dealing with creative burnout, and how having other people in the room pushes you forward to finish your work. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So you're someone who makes your living by playing around with words, as a writer, as a poet, and as a songwriter. How do you decide which you want to go for when you have an idea?
That is a really, really good question, actually. I think it depends what you are trying to say. Music's good at expressing slightly more abstract things. You can have a bit more of a scent of an idea and work that musically, whereas, you know, if you're writing a play, it's got to be... there's got to be a consequence to everything that happens, and there has to be, you know, well, usually some sort of narrative that leads it through. Generally with a poem you want some sort of story or point to make, but really it's not something that I tend to give too much thought to.
Do you tend to kind of get a theme first and then you just think, oh, this will work for this, or do you think I'm going to write a play and then you find a theme to write the play about?
Yeah, it tends to, you get a bit of a smell of it first. Like, there has been a couple of pieces where I've really clearly made that decision. One of the first sort of spoken word pieces of mine that did quite well a few years ago, I initially started writing it as a play, and it was like a 30-40 page script with like 15 characters, this huge big allegorical idea about all these insects and animals in this crazy world, and I sort of realised was like, one, I'm never going to get this staged because it's ridiculous. It would cost millions of pounds to do it, and who's ever going to put that on from an unknown playwright? And I was like, well, actually the story that I want to tell here, I can just tell just me. Okay. So that then became really clear for me that, okay, that could work as a play. It could work as a huge CGI film, but for me and the resources that I've got, I can tell the same story with a poem in 3 minutes.
That's probably the test of a good story as well, if you don't need James Cameron's budget to bring it to life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of the things that a band that I'm working with at the moment that we always say is that it's like the test of a good song is if you can play it on any instrument and it still works. So yeah, it's probably a good point.
So if we jump back, can you remember your first ever paid gig for something creative?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, I can. I remember, so I played music for a lot of years with a good friend of mine. And I remember this will have been about 15 years ago in this terrible two-piece band that I was in. And the primary school that I went to decided that they wanted to do a fundraiser for some wonderful cause. So I grew up in a small town in Easonwold. And this is a long story, but I'm just drawing the picture of this of this first paid gig. And to raise money, they did a 24-hour relay marathon around the school field. Excuse me. So they got dozens and dozens and dozens of people to keep running around the field through the night, and they thought, oh, that's going to get a little bit lonely if we've just got people running around the field all the time. So let's book some entertainment. So
did you have to run with them?
No, we didn't have to run with them, thankfully. No. But on the playground, they thought it would be a good idea to have some entertainment. They had a little barbecue going on. So on the Sunday afternoon, that's great because loads of people were hanging out. But we got booked for, I think it was 7:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning to go to my old primary school and play music for people that were running around the field, and there was no one there apart from the people who were running, who looked pretty tired, and it was freezing cold. It was in about September, 7:30, freezing, and I remember that we got paid £4 each.
Nice.
I don't know why it was
That's
£4
better than no
and not
pounds.
£5. It was better than no pounds. Yeah. I think we just immediately bought a bacon sandwich and went home. But that was my first.
What's the first step on the ladder?
Yeah, that's it.
So are there any memorable steps between there and now? Obviously there must be tons, but any that really kind of stand out?
I think I had wanted to try and make... it was when I started making my own theatre. So I'd done I originally thought I wanted to be an actor, and I'd done amateur dramatics and like being in other people's shows and being part of other people's projects. But the first point where me and a group of friends like went, we're going to make our own thing, and the process that you go through with that, and obviously it was terrible, and we made huge mistakes, and it was ridiculous, and it, probably cringe to look back on it now, but it was a play that we made in 2009, I think. But yeah, going from that point of just being involved with artistic, creative things to going, this is a thing that I'm making and that we're creating together, and then getting that on stage, that felt like a massive step. And yeah, I've just sort of incrementally, hopefully, been working up from then.
So what do you think it was that drew you to want to play with words?
I think it's the fact that we all share it. And I probably, when I first started sort of writing things and being interested in like comic theatre and sort of poetry and like lyrical music especially, I don't think I'd really sort of realised that. But it's the fact that, everyone that I knew at that time, the one thing that they all shared was language. They all had different interests, pursuits, whatever, but the one way that you could communicate with everyone was through that language. And I love the sort of challenge of finding, I'm sort of thinking more, it's a bit more pretentious, but I'm thinking more of like being a kid and stuff now. And I used to love the challenge of trying to make different people laugh, because essentially all you're doing that with is language. And it just kind of grew from there, really. I love the fact that it's, obviously, across the world there are various different languages, but everyone that I knew as a kid shared the same language. So I think it was that kind of drew me to it, really.
So when you were in school, did you enjoy English lessons or did you hate them? Because it can go either way.
Absolutely hated it. Yeah, okay. School was totally not for me. I was not like the thing with me when I was at school was like I used to like read a lot and stuff at home, and I used to read up on like English and biology and science and stuff, and I absolutely loved it when I was at home because I wanted to learn at my own pace. Yeah. But school, the thing that was interesting for me was not like really slowly going through maths or something. I was like, there's 30 people in the room here who all want to have a laugh. Like let's make them laugh. Let's have a good time. Like the interesting thing is not like learning about pi. The interesting thing is we're all in a room. Like, let's have a laugh. So that was like a wasted thing for me at school. So that's a very roundabout way of saying I was just a class clown.
Well, it seems to have worked out all right.
Yeah, essentially that's what I do for a job now. So yeah. I'm not an actual clown, but yeah, there's a lot of crossover there.
So what sort of jobs have you got on at the moment?
So I'm currently I'm making a solo show. I'm wanting to sort of challenge myself to bring in elements of lots of different areas that I work in.
Just to define solo show, I'm sure it's pretty obvious, but it's just you on your own performing? So
it's just me on my own. Obviously previously I've written a lot of scripts for big casts, for small casts. I perform my own poetry, but that's short form. I've written songs for other bands. I've written my own songs that I perform myself. But this is me on stage for an hour. And I'm writing songs, playing songs, performing songs for it. Also, there's elements of poetry in there, storytelling, a little bit of probably crossover into stand-up. And it's an autobiographical piece as well, which is something that I've never done before. Elements of my poetry have touched on that, but rather than like, here's a story that happened to me, in the sort of way that you might expect like a stand-up show to be like, here's a story that happened to me, I'm going to tell you about it, but just pulling in everything that I do.
Is it about one particular time or the whole life?
Yeah, so it's about when I did the coast to coast walk a couple of years ago. Okay, in cool. Summer 2016.
From which bit? Because you can do it at several points up and down the country.
Yeah. So I left from West Coast to Cumbria in St Bees, and I was heading for Whitby. Okay, cool. And it was the craziest time of my life, and loads of things went wrong and loads of interesting things happened, and it was pretty difficult at the time, but I was like, that seems like I've got that story there and I've just got to tell that story. Like, there's a real need to go, because it's funny and it's
well, if nothing went wrong, then there wouldn't be any story. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It'd just be that thing that I did, and I there's the boots and I wore them down. Whereas now I've sort of got this sort of story that I'm compelled to tell, and it's so that sort of comes back to what you were saying earlier on, is that actually with that I am having to make a really clear choice of which part of the story is a song and which part of the story am I just delivering directly to the audience, and what is suited better to a poem.
So how are you working through that?
Yeah, just sort of learning as I go, really.
Do you have people that you bounce your ideas off, or is it?
Yeah, so I'm working with a director and a producer. So it's been directed by Ruby Clark, who works at Sheffield Theatres, and it's been produced by Common Ground Theatre, which is Hannah Davies' company. So they're in the room for a lot of it to sort of bounce those ideas off as well, which is good, because otherwise, if you're making a piece about yourself, by yourself, with yourself, then you could get lost in your own head a little bit.
It can be pretty difficult. I mean, this room's set up for podcasting, but we were just talking earlier, there's music stuff in the corner, and I come in and play around, but it's pretty difficult to get from that to actually having something. I used to be able to do it when I was younger.
Yeah.
I seem to now just overthink things.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, maybe the more you know, the more you realise you don't know, and then it's like...
Do you find sometimes as well that, like, having other people around, it gives you the impetus to keep driving forward with that idea?
Yeah.
So, like, if you play music, sometimes you write an amazing riff and then it'll never go anywhere. Whereas if you've got a few people in the room or other people on the project, do you feel that drives you to finish things, go forward with things?
Yeah, and it can always be a bit scary as well. Like, sometimes if you write something and you're playing it in front of other people, it's like, that's not quite how it's supposed to be, but that was it. You performed it, even if not in front of like a massive audience, just to a couple of people, and that's sort of the song. It can develop in future, but it's an interesting process, and I do miss playing with other people as well. That's the thing. But
because you used to be in a band.
Yeah. So I was in a band from sort of 17 to 22, something like that.
And what happened? Did you have a massive fallout and it was all drugs and the label hated you and you drove a car into a swimming pool, or what happened with that?
No. So we never quite got the label. We got the manager, we got the booking agent, we got the tours and those kind of things. Publishing deal, but not quite the record deal. So we kept going, but ultimately didn't really make much money. We were kind of pouring money into equipment and the van and touring around. It was good fun, but I was care working to sort of support that. And then after 2 years of doing that, I thought it's been good, but I'm happy to sort of let that bit go. Which was hard at the time, but it seems to have worked out now, doing film and that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And is that something that you want to return to? Would you like...
I'd love to. I mean, that's the reason I got all this stuff set up here. One day I think I'll come in, I'll write an album and put it out, but it's just finding time amongst other things.
Yeah.
And that's something I struggle with quite a lot, is being able to prioritise what I want to do, because there's so many film things, there's photography, there's writing songs, there's running community groups, there's like all the different stuff, podcasts. Yeah. And yeah, it can just be a bit like, I just want to take 2 weeks off to work on one thing, but I know if I did that, something else would come up. Absolutely,
and I think that probably that would be something that would be shared by almost any creative person that you start a conversation with. Like, I don't know anyone that just has one thing that they focus on. Sometimes out of necessity for earning money, like you say, like you've got to run a job alongside it, or, you know, maybe freelance creative work that pays for other stuff, but it's this constant juggling thing is so difficult, isn't it? And yes, it's sort of time management is something that you have to either get good at really quickly or be crap at for the rest of your life. And yeah, I think I'm pretty good in sort of like the basics that I have to do. I always kind of get them. It's that extra bit of time. And I find if I don't sort of schedule something in, I'll be kind of wondering, like, what do I do? And then you spend like an hour thinking about what you should do rather than just doing it. So yeah, but you can't just sort of always live your life by your schedule. You have to have things sort of bit of free time to be able to think about stuff. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that I'm really bad at. I very rarely ever build like free time, like time where I'm doing nothing into my schedule. Is that something that you do? Do you have like a, right, I try. I'm not doing any work after this time, or... I try and keep Tuesday evenings, but inevitably something comes up and then you try and move that to a Thursday and then that Thursday becomes something else. So. Yeah. But at least having that thing in the diary is something I didn't used to do. So that alone has helped, and it means that I get more than half of the Tuesdays off. And there's weekends as well, you know, inevitably there's sometimes you have to work weekends, but sometimes you get them off. And anyway, this is becoming like a sort of scheduling talk. But yeah, we touched on something briefly. Have you ever suffered burnout? Yeah, I have a couple of times. How do you get yourself out of that? If you've already got obligation in for like commissions or contracts that you're working on, it can be really difficult because you've got a. So what I did was I had to put a cut-off point in somewhere in the future, stop taking any work in, and just kind of get through what I had already on my plate, which ended up being about sort of 6 weeks worth of work, and then just say like, right, I just need some time out and some headspace now, because I think it's just so easy to do, because when you're a freelancer, turning work down feels such a counterintuitive thing to do, even if you're already really busy, as I'm sure you understand. So obviously the way to guard against that is to sort of try and, not to go back to scheduling, but to try and manage your scheduling. So
deadlines really do help.
Yeah, deadlines do help. But then, obviously, I ended up in a situation where I thought across like a 6 month period, I thought I'd managed my workload quite well. But then I had 3 or 4 long-term projects that all overran, that all then had deadlines on, and I just had so much work on and no headspace. So yeah, it can be sort of easy to burn out. But at the end of the day, you also got to realise, like, it's more important that you're well and all right than that X project happens or whatever. So I ended up having to I gave a project over to another writer that was able to sort of finish it off. Was fine. I didn't nobody got hurt. It was a perfectly amicable thing with the people that I was working with, but I just had to say to them, I can't take any more work moving forwards because I'm gonna burst. So
I guess it's trying to spot the problems before they come up as well.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do kind of week to week to keep yourself inspired and happy? And are you into yoga? Do you meditate? Is it just reading? What do you do that's kind of your you time that keeps you creative?
Yeah. I make a massive effort to read. Just because it's escapist and informative at the same time. And I do yoga as regularly as I can. So it used to be every morning. Now it's probably about 2 or 3 times a week. Other than that, that's probably it really. But then I also, my own creative pursuits are quite, like, being engaged and busy in those is different to, creative work, isn't it? Because there's a different, it's more expressive rather than obligation. So
yeah, like you often host like open mic nights and things like that.
Yeah.
I guess going to that, does that feel like work, or do you just feel that's kind of, you can relax in that, or is it a mixture of two?
It's the mixture of two. Sometimes it's the best job. It's like busking, and which I do a little bit of as well, and running open mic nights and stuff as well. Sometimes it's the best job in the world because you feel like you're a gatekeeper of a scene and you're platforming people who need it, and that you're supporting a creative environment. And other times you've got the other not so nice side of that. So you've got to sort of try and be in charge of what you're doing to a degree that means that it's not horrible.
Yeah. So what's your opinion on the York creative scene? What do you think people are doing well, and what do you think could be better?
I think the DIY creative scene in York is awesome at the moment. It's really, really rich. The music scene and the sort of poetry scene is really great. I think the art scene above that leaves a bit to be desired. I think I wish it had more. I wish it had some teeth. I feel like the city as a whole is really good at seeming like it's an artsy city and putting art out there that really is maybe not for the people that are from York, that live in York. I'm sort of trying to say that without naming organisations, but sure. Like there's things happening in York at the moment. There's theatres appearing and there's flowers appearing all over the city, which is really great for the city, but where they're appearing are in the tourist-based areas. I don't think anybody is going to put up a theatre at the end of Kingsway North or at the end of Green Lane in Acomb, but I think maybe the organisations that have control of the money should be thinking about maybe doing that.
So more engagement for everyday people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of what's going on in the city, I think a lot of people could be feeling like it's not really anything to do with them, even though it's their city. So that would be my criticism, really.
So what about stuff outside of York then? Like, do you work in different cities, different countries, anything like that?
Yeah, so as a poet, I sort of gig all over the country. I've not been taking any gigs recently because I've got the show coming up and I'll be touring that sort of early next year. I'm currently on the writers group at Sheffield Theatres, so which is really great because I'm getting a lot of mentoring from them and working towards developing a script to hopefully be able to pitch to them towards the end of the year, which is great. And so yeah, getting a lot of a bit of teaching and a lot of knowledge from like contemporary playwrights and just being in the building and being in the space there is great. And they sort of made me feel really welcome, which is good.
Any practical tips for someone who wants to improve their writing, whether it's poetry or songwriting or things like that? Don't
be scared of being crap.
Okay.
Like, just do it. Like absolutely do it. Don't like just I don't know, if you've got the impulse to create something, make it, and then to improve what you do. Like, what makes you a writer is not being able to write things down or write your thoughts down, it's the rewriting. So once you've got it out there and you've got the first draft out there and you've got an idea of a poem and it's got this terrible rhyme scheme and it doesn't quite say what you want it to say, like, you just need to do that and then go back to it, and you can always tweak it and improve it, and but it's just doing it as much as possible.
Any particular resources or books or online things like that you recommend people look at?
For anyone who's interested in theatre or playwriting, I would really recommend the Royal Court Theatre Playwrights podcast, which has been sort of really good for me. Recently, it's a good insight into a lot of contemporary writers, and they've got like a good span of playwrights on there, from the old dusty fuddy-duddies to the brand new sort of interesting, exciting people. So I'd recommend that.
Cool.
And also, everyone in the world ever should listen to Imaginary Advice by Ross Sutherland, which is he's a poet and storyteller, and that is a storytelling podcast that plays with the form fantastically. They run from sort of, some of them are 9 minutes long, some of them are an hour, but it's Imaginary Advice, and it's mind-blowingly good.
Okay. Well, I'll put a link to that in the description.
Do.
So if people want to see or hear more of your work, where do they go?
Well, I'm doing a little bit of work with Say Out at the moment, so anything that happens with my show, I'll be sort of promoting through that, and obviously Common Ground Theatre, so you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter. I'm also working with Young Thugs, with a band called Drooligans, so keep an eye on Young Thugs, again on Facebook, Twitter, online.
You doing anything at the Fringes, yeah?
Yeah, so Say Out, I've got a showcase on at the Great Yorkshire Fringe, which is just going to be local poets, like, nailing some good poetry. And then on the Fringe of the Fringe, Young Thugs are doing a takeover night at 1331, so Drew are going to perform in there. That's on the Monday. And then Common Ground are doing a scratch night at the Fringe of the Fringe again at 1331, so I'll be scratching some material for my solo show there as well. So
cool, tons of stuff.
It's going to be a busy week.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having us on, man.